Rupert Murdoch may face criminal charges. We've got just a massive blitz of news straight ahead. Our websites are Infowars.com, and we're streaming video at Prisonplanet.tv. Hi, this is Alex
Chen Radio Network.
Boy, I tell you, I've got a challenge here to get to all this news before our guest joins us. Look at these headlines. Facing bailout or chaos, Greek parliament starts debate on austerity laws. Raise the taxes, cut the benefits, and pay almost all the money to the very banks that created the crisis and who have now put all their people in charge of the government. Because their last group of operatives over Greece, and the same as in Ireland, Spain, Italy, the United States, the last group was put in place. All of the operatives are Goldman Sachs and J.P. Morgan. There's other big banks involved in the thieving, but it's their operatives all over the world. When they take down New Zealand, it's Goldman Sachs operatives that are the finance minister and or the prime minister or president. When you see them run a scam in Chile, it's the same people. It's always a former president of Goldman Sachs or J.P. Morgan. When you see them do it in England, I mean, it's a crew of scam artists. And then you look at who's funding Agenda 21. Same groups. It's so amazing. And then we did find the articles during the break. Southern Poverty Law Center and others say we're insane for not wanting a world government. First, we were kooks for saying a world government was coming. Now they admit it's here. We're bad because we don't like the world government now. Have you noticed that? They don't deny it's a UN program in our towns and cities. They just say we're bad because we don't want it. Remember the old days when the world government didn't exist? Remember we were crazy and the big mega banks, the international banks, they weren't going to try to set up a world government. No, that's what kooks talk about. Now it's in the Associated Press, world government's here, global carbon taxes paid to the UN, but you're still bad. You're bad for being right. You're bad for warning fellow Americans. You're bad for warning your fellow Canadians. And I guess I was bad too when I pointed out over a month ago that there was clear fraud in Iowa. On January 3rd. And then it came out 3 weeks later that they said, we're throwing out the results and just giving it to Santorum. There was fraud and trucks missing with ballots. Well, there were no trucks. It was they vote at the precinct, post it, and then call it in. But we had the witnesses. We had the voting fraud experts. There was fraud in Iowa, now admitted total fraud. There was fraud in Florida, now being admitted total fraud. There was fraud in South Carolina, now admitted total fraud. There was admitted total fraud in Nevada. We wrote articles about it, exposed it. The exit poll showed Ron Paul in first place. Polls showed him in first place. He gets third place. Every exit poll, every major poll showed Ron Paul winning Maine. He doesn't win. Same deal. And Ron Paul has now done what he didn't do in 2008. He's come out and said, yes, there's fraud. And there is fraud. And he's got to point it out. I mean, first they told you he couldn't win. Then they told gave him less time in the debates. Then when they did give him attention, they lied about him and demonized him. This is the same media that went along with the lies about WMDs. The same media that knows the government was caught shipping guns into Mexico to blame the Second Amendment and won't even talk about it now. And now Ron Paul has come out. This is from Business Wire. It's up on Infowars.com. Ron Paul campaign comments on Maine caucus results. Headline, Ron Paul refuses to concede Maine official campaign release. And they go on to point out that all of their data shows that they basically should have won. You know, the big telltale was when 2% were reporting in Nevada. The entire corporate whore, dinosaur, prostitute, sewer stream, traitor media said that he was the undisputed victor. And I'm not going to go back over Iowa. I've already done 4 or 5 shows on that. I mean, I sat there and watched Fox News with Karl Rove, and I played the clip here, saying, yeah, well, they lost a bunch of the ballots and trucks, and I started laughing. We don't know where the precinct heads are, and all these precincts happen to be the university towns, like Ames, which in polls, Ron Paul was getting close to 60% of the vote. Of course, he ended up, getting like 15 once they had their little special trucks come up missing when there are no trucks involved in ballots. and just all disappeared. And Karl Rove said, well, you know what? There was a gentleman's agreement between Mitt Romney and Santorum, and they decided to give those delegates to Santorum, and that's the way it is. And the Fox host didn't ask him one time, well, who's your source? Where was this behind the closed doors meeting? And then people said, Alex, don't say there's fraud in Iowa, even though we had delegates and people calling in who witnessed it all the next day and the day after that. The eyewitnesses. A lot of them who swore out statements later. And then it came out, of course, 3 weeks after that. Oh, yeah, it's all a fraud. We don't know what happened. We're throwing the results out, but giving it all to Santorum now. He just gets everything. Well, now Ron Paul is saying that something is going on and that things aren't jiving, and they break it all down. And they are beginning to contest it, and they better do it. They better do it. And I'll cover that more later if we have time to get into it. But speaking of media manipulation, and it's not just News Corps that's doing this. News Corps has been caught paying off police. They admit that goes on. They've been caught spying on people. They've been caught doing all this stuff. And I'll assure you, it is not just going on in England or Europe. But here's the New York Times. British arrest 8 in inquiry about Murdoch tabloid. And now there's talk of the Justice Department indicting members of News Corps here in North America. That's the parent company of Fox News, for those that don't know. And you wonder why suddenly you're hearing Fox host in the last 2 months say Obama's a good Christian man, Huckabee and others. I've talked to Fox host. I'm just going to leave it at that. Multiple insiders at Fox. I had 2 sources and then lost them because even though I was allowed to talk about it without saying names, some people got yelled at and threatened. But I have some other sources that I developed years ago that I've talked to. And yes, they've been told in memos, you will stop bashing Barack Obama or this whole place is going down. Because people have complained. They're like, well, that's going to kill ratings, number one. Not that those traitors up there actually care about this country. They want to at least be able to bash Obama. That gets the ratings. And they've been told, back off. Because the Justice Department's looking at arresting Rupert Murdoch. And if I was Murdoch, I would go ahead and release everything he's got on Obama right now. Because let me tell you, the way this is going, they're going for broke. You know, you notice they got rid of Glenn Beck. And he was told, you will stop bashing George Soros. You will stop covering all this. And Glenn Beck, to his credit, said, I'm not going to do that. And left Fox, and his contract was. I mean, I've gone after Glenn Beck a lot because behind the scenes, I'm going to be a guest on Fox in New York, and they tell us, well, Glenn Beck's throwing a fit if you come on the other show, and is saying they won't ever have this other host on if you do that. And Glenn Beck's gone after my sponsors and done all sorts of stuff. But I mean, he is a hard-nosed wolf, but he did not sell out to News Corps. And you notice Judge Napolitano, who had the second highest ratings, I actually looked him up, on Fox Business and rising and was making major news, gone. So Fox News is rolling over to George Soros and Obama. And you know what? I think when you're done doing that, they're still going to arrest you. I think you've made a miscalculation. All right, more news straight ahead on Iran, Whitney Houston, and a lot more. We should never be afraid to die. That's the great Mr. Bellamy, fan of the show, been on the show. We love you, Muse. Doing a great job out there. Liberty is popular, and this broadcast is all about legalizing freedom. Okay, we've already gone over Ron Paul coming out and saying there's evidence of fraud and that they're going to contest Romney supposedly being the winner because all the votes aren't even counted, and there's been evidence in other states of fraud. I was just getting, before I get into Whitney Houston, what's happening with the Arab League and the big move towards a wider war in Syria and Iran, I want to go back to what's happening with Rupert Murdoch. The problem with having a criminal government is that they cannot be trusted to go after people for other crimes. And then once you have a criminal government, different levels of criminals within the system can't ever blow the whistle on each other because then a criminal at any level can bring down the whole house of cards, and then that allows the criminality to only intensify. And it's part of the corruption process. And so, from what I've seen and some of the folks pleading guilty, some of the people died. The star witness was murdered in England. That was just or Arkan cited. That this is a war between two different factions of the globalist. And I predicted when this really started breaking 6 months ago that you'd see a big switch in News Corps. And I've now confirmed that they've been told to lay off Obama and to lay off the Labour Party, the Democratic Party's counterpart in England, that mafia, or people are going to go to jail, including Rupert Murdoch's son, bare minimum, and perhaps even Rupert Murdoch himself. And what's being asked today by the London Guardian and Reuters and others is, will the U.S. Justice Department, who is investigating News Corps, indict people at News Corps here in North America? Now, again, this is a Justice Department caught shipping guns into Mexico that's killed police and Border Patrol and over 2,000 Mexican citizens. Justice Department admits that. And CBS News told you what we knew would be there. They got the memos that it was to be blamed on the Second Amendment. Now, that was buried in a CBS News article with a link to the memo. But ship guns into Mexico and ship them into Indiana, Illinois, Florida, other states, to then call for shutting down gun shows. I mean, these are criminals staging terror attacks against America. Have you read the definition of terrorism? Threatening violence or carrying out violence so that populations or individuals accept your political demands. You ship guns into Mexico to get a bunch of people killed so you can blame the Second Amendment. That's terrorism. But you notice, oh, you're not hearing about Fast and Furious on Fox anymore. And Darrell Issa, as I predicted, the Attorney General a few months ago said, hey, George Bush was running similar programs. And boy, they started shutting down those hearings real fast. And Issa, one day after, said, well, it's up to Obama to do something about this. We've caught the Attorney General lying. How can Republicans ever bring down a Bill Clinton or a Barack Obama or other mobsters as they pardon mobsters and others? How can they ever do that if they themselves are up to their eyeballs in it? And see, this is how, once corruption is tolerated, the sky's the limit. That's why they announced 2 weeks ago that, oh, yes, there's now IOUs for all the major federal pensions. Those have been completely raided to give to the far end too big to fail banks. So you're not going to be getting your pension funds. I mean, if you're 45 working for the government, you're getting nothing. Let's say you're 63, about to retire in a couple of years. You'll get something. It's going to be devalued, and it's going to be reduced. And they're already got the media saying it's not your money, it's a form of welfare. All because you serve the system. All because you let the banksters take over. All because when Ban Ki-moon announces world government, that's the head of the UN, you still laugh at people like me because you were taught it was fashionable to laugh at people that talked about global government. We're being conquered by a bunch of criminal, Bernie Madoff types, Ken Lay types, and if you don't fully wake up and get angry, they're going to win. They're going to fully bankrupt us like Nigeria or Chile, or what happened to the Argentinians, who were just as wealthy as we were 15 years ago. The old saying, rich is an Argentine. So, oh, and here's another one the Daily Caller reported on, and then it ended up making it in some other major newspapers. Bribery, compromised officials leave indicted financial crime suspects free from prosecution under Holder's DOJ. And they leaked 2 DOJ documents and a lot more in this lengthy article that Tucker Carlson's outfit put out. And this was in federal documents. I got to give Carlson, even though he has said publicly that I'm a piece of trash, credit for doing this, because this had not been in U.S. news. It was in the federal documents. And they paid off the Justice Department people. We know the names.